Today we are going over some of the hearings that the Shanna Gardner murder for hire case of her ex-husband Jared Bridegan, also some people refer to this as the Microsoft executive murder for hire case. Holy moly, let's dive into them. I'm your host, Annette Lyon, USA Today bestselling author of the suspense novel Just One More and a whole bunch of other stuff, as well as being a woman of faith and a chocoholic and true crime junkie. Some of the hearings that have gone on since May 2nd of 2024 all the way up to through August of 2024. There's been a lot. So I might have to break this up into a couple of videos. On May 2nd of 2024, we had a hearing where it turns out that Lindsay Butler, who was an ATF agent, was going over some iCloud evidence. This is prior to the hearing, but this is what came out in the hearing, and that she realized that there had been some proprietary email that may have gone to the state attorney's office. This is per the defense. She had maybe forwarded something to the prosecution that she maybe didn't realize she shouldn't have. The prosecution said they never saw this stuff, that they deleted it as soon as it arrived. Or one of the prosecution attorneys said, we received so many things, I can't say for sure if I didn't open it or not, but I have no memory of seeing this information. And as soon as we were notified that there was something we should not have, we all deleted it immediately. Jose Baez, of course, called this reckless misconduct. And so he thinks that the cure, as they do in, court parlance, the cure should be to exclude every text that's part of the case, which is that's a lot of evidence that's relevant and important. He wants to have all of the texts. They should be excluded from the trial. And then May 13th, there was another hearing that was talking about elements that were the Jose Baez said that were attorney-client privilege. That motion was denied by the court. Judge Kite is her name. On May 15th, we had the Arthur hearing, which, holy moly, was huge. Goodness. An Arthur hearing in Florida is a bond hearing, essentially. Both sides give some of the main evidence they have. Some people call it a mini trial. It's not a trial. Hearsay can enter as evidence, which can't in a regular trial, of course. The bar of proof is much lower. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's more likely than not. And that's something else that Jose Baez, her attorney, he got Casey Anthony off. He keeps saying things that are blatant lies himself in court, and he accuses the state attorneys of lying and the detective of lying, but he is spewing crap himself. Again, I'm all for a fair trial. I'm all for a vigorous defense. That's not what he's just throwing out crap. The standard is not beyond a reasonable doubt in an Arthur hearing. And you know this. So why are you saying that, you big schmuck? They bring up Detective Chris Johns. He's the lead detective on this case because it was one of his first murder cases. Of course, Jose Baez has a field day with that, saying that he is incompetent and did, gross misconduct, blah, blah, blah.
Shut up!
Sure, Jose. Detective Chris Johns, he testifies that after Jared Bridegan stepped out of his car, was ambushed, gunned down, that a Good Samaritan took the little Bexley, their 2-year-old daughter, from her car seat, put a blanket around her so she couldn't see her dad, on the ground, bleeding to death, if he wasn't already dead by that point, crying, saying loud noises, boom, boom, dad's sick on the ground, dad needs help. How sad is that? They found 2 rounds in the frame of the car, inches from her car seat, which is why the charges have been upgraded, because this poor child. According to Chris Johns, the evidence shows that the original plan was to take out Jared Bridegan, was not this ambush style situation. The original plan was to kidnap him, take him to a second location, and take care of him there. Things were just taking longer, and then apparently some of the reasons were Mario, who was Shanna Gardner's second husband. He said that while it was taking a whole lot longer to make the hit happen because of COVID and the pandemic, people weren't leaving their homes, so it was hard to get Jared out of his house to actually do the deed. So Detective Johns also said that days before the hit, that Mario and Shanna had taken a trip to Hawaii. And it seems to be ostensibly to try to rekindle their relationship because they had been planning a divorce between the two of them. They had formed the children's school that they might be getting a divorce, but they might wait till the end of the school year to have less disruption for the children. Because you're such a good mom and everything else you've done to disrupt their lives. Okay. Mario then says later that when he's talking to Henry Tenon, who's the actual gunman, that he needs to happen that week, meaning the hit. The hit has to happen this week or his marriage would end. For those unaware, doing a hit is on another human being, in the presence of a child no less, not a way to save a marriage. In case that was an unclear thing, just don't do that. Anna also wanted what she called a social investigation, meaning DCFS, because she wanted full custody of the twins. She and Jared had boy-girl twins. Their divorce and the custody battle went on for years and years and years. As she dragged through the courts, paying for it with her parents' huge fortune from the Stampin' Up! Company. They're the founders. Dr. John says that everything regarding custody and the kids was litigated. Just every little tiny thing. Her parents set up a trust. The idea was, here's a bunch of money for Shanna. Sounds like they maybe didn't trust her with money directly, because Mario was made the trustee. And they also say, according to Detective Johns, that this trust was one way to keep money out of Jared's hands. And the idea was, once Shanna no longer had any ties to Jared, then she could get the money. So that's another motive that the prosecution is pointing out, that if he dies, there are no more ties, and she gets the money in her trust. She can't access it directly, only through Mario until then. So I was also wondering, does that mean once the twins hit 18 and they're adults and there's no more custody or any of that, is that when she would then have access to the money? But that's still several years out. The kids, I believe, are about 12 years old now. Shanna's first interview with the detectives of the Jacksonville Police Department was in March of 2022, so just weeks after Jared's death. At the time, Detective John says she seemed cooperative and forthcoming. They were interviewing everybody that could possibly be connected, and his murder was a huge mystery. According to Detective Johns, Jared lived a really boring life. This guy wasn't into drugs. He didn't even have a speeding ticket. Like, this guy was just the blandest thing ever, so why would anyone want to get rid of him? Well, there's one person who would. On April 15th, 2 months after the murder, Shanna and Mario, on their own, go to the police department and seek out their own conversation, which the police then call her second interview. They're upset. They think that the media is making her look bad, and the neighbors think that they were involved. And Mario asks if the police department is pushing that narrative. And Shanna's just so upset because people think I did it. Poor baby, well, allegedly you did. She then offers her own theories as to what happened to Jared. Maybe it was a drug deal gone wrong. And Detective Johns goes, again, this is the most law-abiding guy in the world. And then her second suggestion was, maybe it was part of a gang initiation. I've heard that there was, nearby where he lived, there was like gangs. And he's like, no, I've never been aware of someone in a suburban area as part of a gang initiation. And that area that you're saying is a hub of gangs. It's a brand new subdivision, and that's not where gangs hang out. And then she's like, well, maybe his new wife, Kirsten, did it. I've seen with interviews and even just pictures of Kirsten, I think she might have a hard time killing flies. Like, she seems just one of those gentle, kind people. So the idea that she could take out her own husband when she has 2 small children with him, why in the world would she, on top of the fact that I don't think she's capable of it? Okay, Shanna. A friend that in many of the court documents is referred to as KJ initials, and now we know that's actually Kim Jensen. She testified in a recent hearing, and so her name was definitely out. She is listed as a possible co-conspirator, which is very relevant for a lot of this stuff because later Jose Baez is trying to say that, the police are, again, misconduct, they're acting inappropriately because they're trying to supposedly threaten Kim or scare her. Some of what the police said to her were things like, You need to tell the truth. You're about to testify to a grand jury, and you need to tell the truth, because if you don't, there's some serious consequences to not telling the truth. How is that a threat? That's the reality. Police came to her house and just said, just so you're aware, your name is going to come up. This is before the grand jury as well. Said, your name is going to come up in the grand jury. And we wanted just to give you a heads up on that. Jose Baez was like, oh, that's some big threat. And how, and I'm thinking, okay, if she knows about how Jared was killed, and it appears that she does, but just for argument's sake, if she knew things, and she knows these people are capable of murder, she knows this, and she then cooperates with police, isn't that putting a target on her? That would be scary. And so the police telling her, just so you're aware, your name's going to come up. That, to me, that is actually a kind step for the police to do, to say, just in case you need to take any precautions, in case that's something that might worry you, we're informing you that your name is coming up in the grand. These sounds like good police work. Jose Baez, shut up. There were tons of texts using code words, funeral potatoes, or casserole, and magic to refer to hitmen and taking someone out. In Latter-day Saint parlance, for those who don't know, funeral potatoes, very common dish. It's a potato cheesy casserole kind of thing. Lots of variations of it, but some variation is found very commonly at LDS funerals, the lunch afterward. And part of that is because the congregation, the women often will provide the luncheon, and it's easy to go, okay, will you bring some salad, a green salad, you bring some rolls, you bring some funeral potatoes, you bring some ham or whatever. It's an easy thing to assign, and it's an easy thing to make in large quantities. It just happens a lot. So they've gotten the name of funeral potatoes. But in these texts, and it was the group that was later, we find out, is called the Lunch Bunch, real original, of like 8 friends, including Shanna and Kim Jensen. Then there was also text with just Kim, and also with another friend named Susan Law. Early in the case, she's referred to just by her initials, SL. Kim and Susan and Shanna, the 3 of them, there's more to Jared's death than with the others. So some of these texts go back to as early as 2015. One thing that the defense is trying to say is that it was all a joke, and it's based on the fact that Susan's husband, if I understand the testimony correctly, that her husband was approached at work saying that, then she blamed it on the fact that he's African American, that someone came to him saying, would you know where I can find a hitman? The idea is that she told this story to the friends, the Lunch Punch group, and they thought it was just hilarious. And so from that point on, they used hitman as a joke. Okay. That's Jose Baez's argument, and I do believe that at some points it probably was used as a joke here and there. However, one woman in this friend group, if one of them actually does want a hitman, maybe that joke and where it came from would lead her to think, oh, you know what? I wonder if Susan's husband does know. So to me, both can be true. In fact, Kim Jensen later did testify in a different hearing that, yeah, it started out as a joke. Of course, she denies that they were actually planning a hit, but there were enough texts that were rather damning that were like, explain that one away. I don't think so. So there was the funeral potatoes / casserole text, and then there was also a code word of magic. Like, do you know of anyone who can do magic tricks to make someone disappear forever? I've got to get rid of them. Do magic, however she phrased it at that time. And then she said, I'm not even kidding. Jose Baez, her attorney, of course, comes out and says, well, that was said in 2020 and he didn't die till 2022. And you're like, yeah, but she was planning this for years. And Mario has even said he couldn't get it done during the lockdown of pandemic because Jared wasn't leaving his house. This was actually slowly in the works for a long time, even before the divorce, and then throughout the divorce, it was a long time in coming. So to say that it was all a joke forever and that nothing was relevantly about actually finding a hitman is a load of crap, in my opinion. Shanna had said she could not, quote, bear 9 more years of the court system, which would be until the kids were 18. Yeah, poor baby. Now, Jared's other 2 children and his widow are dealing with stuff for life. So, according to Mario, this is hearsay, but that's allowed in an Arthur hearing. Okay, so Mario had said, oh yeah, I can take care of Jared. I can take care of him. And sometimes I followed him in his car and he didn't know it. Sometimes I've been so close to him I could touch him and he didn't know it. Yeah, anytime there was any kind of a concern, and Mario would pipe up, oh, I can take care of him. Do you want me to now? And there was some confusion over Henry Tenon's and his name. And it was funny because later on, an August hearing, Jose Baez, he's questioning Kim Jensen, and he's trying so hard to prove supposedly that Detective Johns was lying about something. And part of it was the question didn't even make sense, and I don't remember what it was now, but because it was referring to a tenant or Tenon, and he's like, so Detective Johns was lying, right? And Kim Jensen actually said, I think there was just a misunderstanding because tenant, they sound very similar. We might have just been on crossed wires kind of thing. I think it was a misunderstanding, which was not what Jose Baez was hoping to hear. When at his own press conference, and I have a video on that, go watch that, he claimed that Kim was just outraged at these huge lies that the detective had told. And when she testified then in August, in a hearing that he demanded that they have, she was like, no, I think it was a misunderstanding. I think Detective Johns said that Jose Baez later was railing that, oh, that's an outright lie. You actually watched Detective Johns' testimony from the Arthur hearing. Like, one of them was saying, did you talk to Susan Law yourself? Then it was SL. And he said, I don't remember. I think one of my guys did. It seems like we had a hard time getting a hold of her, like she changed her number or something. And then Jose Baez goes, he claimed that Susan Law changed her number. She never did. That's an outright lie. And if that's all you know, that does sound concerning until you watch Detective John's actual testimony and you realize, oh, he didn't say anything as strongly as this is what happened and I'm lying. Details on the timeline that came out that were interesting. When Henry Tenon was first arrested, the police already had him as a person of interest. They had done enough of their research to tie him to the murder. They weren't going to charge him quite yet, but they wanted to get him behind bars and be able to ask him more questions, whatever else. They arrested him on outstanding drug charges. Henry Tenon is arrested on drug charges that have nothing to do with Jared's death or Shanna or anything else. Yet, as soon as he's arrested, and Shanna finds out that he's arrested, she frantically calls her parents, her lawyer, then it was a man named Henry Cox, and the family's PR firm in Salt Lake City. Police hadn't told anyone Tenon was a person of interest in the case of Jared's death. They'd kept that close to the vest. But as soon as he's arrested, you didn't know what charges, but he's arrested. And she's like, oh, she immediately starts calling her lawyer, her parents, the PR. Her phones are being tapped. And they learned through that she even was like, I better go next door and borrow my neighbor's phone to give Mario a heads up. If they're listening on my phone, which they were, they'll know that I called from my phone. And these are the behaviors of an innocent woman. There are two people that they are related to the Intrepid group, the PR firm, Linda Lucetti and Mr. Thomas. I missed his first name, but the two of them are business partners in this PR firm, and they have taken on this case. They say it's pro bono. I'm wondering is it for sure pro bono, or is it they're doing it as a favor because they've had the Gardners as clients for so long? Maybe this one is pro bono. I don't know. Apparently, though, Detective Johns and at least one other police officer from the Jacksonville Police Department, they fly out to Salt Lake. They want to talk to Linda and Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas's wife, she makes sure that she's the one who answers the door, and she refuses to let them speak to her husband. They then tried to speak to Linda Lucetti. According to Detective Johns, she frantically runs around the front of her house to try to avoid them. She denies this later, of course, because that's an embarrassing thing. And then they tried to serve her with a subpoena at that point, which then Jose Baez says was illegal and a misdemeanor to try to do something in a different state. I don't know the legalities if he's accurate on that. But if so, there are other things that he's done in other states in this case. In February or in March of 2022, there was a mid-level employee at the Intrepid group who worked in social media, and there are texts and calls with Shanna from that employee. So there's something going on right about the time of the murder and shortly after with this group. They also pointed out that the Ring camera that was in front of Shanna's house and recording all of the time shut off and stopped recording. I believe it was January 18th or thereabouts, till after. It should have picked up something like him dropping off the kids, his car driving past their house, something. But it sounds like she knew that they were going to do something along these lines at some point. They wanted to encourage chatter on the wiretap. Once you do the wiretap, if no one's talking, that's not helpful. So they thought, well, if we arrest Tenon, don't say what the charges are, that might get people talking. Now, a couple of things that were completely ridiculous. A lot came to Jose Baez. Jose, he's an arrogant schmuck. There's one point he says something along the lines of how Mormons are uneducated. were a lot of things, and even there's a lot of fringe people who obviously do bad things. See most of the videos on my channel so far. We actively promote education. Most of the, like, even my generation that has a bulk of stay-at-home moms, most of us have degrees or several years in college. A lot of Latter-day Saints have graduate degrees, and anyway, no, we're encouraged to have education. So that was just a ridiculous comment of his. He also talked about the jokes, the off-color jokes that were in the Lunch Bunch group when they were like saying gross things about Jared. They even nicknamed him stupid. Could you be more unoriginal? Some apparently crude text. Jose Baez goes, so basically like Mormon humor. It's like, man, no, there is some Mormon humor and the others might not find funny. Dirty jokes I can get. That is not what you would call Mormon humor. A lot of them will gasp if you just say the kinds of words you find in the Bible. Some other little highlights of Jose Baez. He's trying to get Detective Johns to say that this text or that text was a joke specifically. Detective Johns, he just has to keep saying, you're asking me to speculate on their mindset. I can't do that. I don't know what was going on in their head. At one point he says to Detective Johns, you're aware that there are no texts or phone calls between Shanna Gardner and Henry Tenon in the whole world, right? And bless Detective Johns, he goes, I can't say that, no. And he says that, I can say that on the devices that we recovered, we didn't find anything like that, but I don't know that there never was. Jose Baez, that's what he was doing the whole time. And poor Detective Johns, he was on the stand for hours. There was a point where Jose Baez was like, how can you not remember if Kim Jensen was brought to the station in your car, or if she drove herself with a police escort? How can you not remember? And he basically was like, because that wasn't the important part of the day. At one point, Jose Baez also even said, like, he basically was arrested. And like, no, it was a traffic stop, and then they served her a subpoena. That's not even almost being arrested. He exaggerates and lies. And that's why I'm not okay with him. Do the things that you should as a good defense attorney. Don't lie. Don't accuse others of lying. Don't exaggerate. That's not seeking truth. That is not defending. He says, well, you didn't tell Judge Kite this thing, did you? And Detective Johns goes, there was no reason to. Why would a detective just go out of his way to say, Judge, by the way, in the course of an investigation? Like, that was not the gotcha you thought it would be, Jose. Loser. At one point, the whole thing about the truck that was used in the murder was Tenon's truck. It came back to him. Tenon had a roommate. Oh, you did tell Tenon's roommate about the truck. That's bad police work. Basically leaking information to the public shouldn't have. Detective John says, no. We were aware that this roommate already knew that information. We confirmed what he already knew in an effort to get him to cooperate with us. We weren't just randomly leaking information to the public. Again, all of these gotcha moments that were not gotcha moments. We have, fortunately, great prosecutors and a great detective who just is not putting up with this crap and isn't falling. There was even a point where this happened a few times where Jose Baez goes, well, you just admitted that da-da-da. This happened so many times. I'm not going to even say what they were about. I don't even remember. You just admitted it. And Detective John says, no, I didn't. No, you just said that I refreshed your memory when I handed you this report. And he said, no, I did not. I said I had never seen that report till you handed it to me. I never said that you refreshed my memory. And that type of conversation happened multiple times in the Arthur hearing. It got to be ridiculous. He's putting words into witnesses' mouths. And if you aren't listening carefully, you might believe it. Baez goes on, and later on in his press conference goes, oh, lies, lies, lies. No. Well, then why did she do this? And he says, I don't know why. I don't know why he or she did this or that or the other. Well, then she meant this. I don't know that he meant this or that she meant this in that text. I know that this text was sent from this device to this device. And then even to the point of Shanna and Mario were going to get a divorce in a few months, right? And again, he says, that's what they indicated to the school because he doesn't have personal knowledge and he wants to make it very clear that he's not making statements that he doesn't know. He's saying, this is what I know that they told the school staff something along those lines. I don't know for sure what their intent was, what their plans were. One of my favorites, though, is when he says, yeah, okay, he mentions a text message Detective Johns referred to, and he said, well, that would be a damning text message. Why didn't you bring it to court? And Detective Johns goes, because I'm a detective. I don't enter evidence in court. Mr. Baez, you know that. So why are you asking stupid questions? And the prosecution was really good with their own arguments. Although the one thing I wish they would do called Baez out on his leading questions, his calls for speculation, ask and answer type objections. I wish they would have had objections and just made him look like the idiot he is. But it almost feels like maybe he was intimidating to them because he's such a big name celebrity attorney. I don't know. When they were questioning Detective Johns, they talked about the lunch bunch quoting Mario and how the best time for magic, meaning doing a hit, is when things are amicable, when there's not a big fight going on or a current court case. After Detective Johns took the stand, then we had Henry Cox, who was Shanna's first lawyer in this matter. For the first few months after her arrest, I believe she went through a couple of different lawyers before getting to Jose Baez, and he has a whole team, so it's not just him. Cox was retained in April of 2022, after her first interview with the police. He said that he would promise to surrender her to the police if Florida wanted to arrest her. He was aware that she was moving around, that her parents had visited Atlanta and Savannah, Georgia, also Tallahassee, and that supporting her in those cities was easier than from Washington State. And he insisted that those cities, even though they were in different states, were very close to Jacksonville, so it was fine. Completely ignoring that if it's in another state, you have to deal with extradition and all of that fun stuff. So it doesn't matter really how many miles there were. So when I started wondering about jurisdiction issues, the legalities of why is Jose Baez freaking out that Detective Johns went to Utah to try to serve a subpoena, but he's totally cool with his client just going to 2 or 3 different states when she needed to stay local in case she was going to be arrested. Eventually, Henry Cox says, he actually even said, let's take the chance and have you go to Washington State. That seems like a very odd advice from a lawyer that, yeah, let's take a chance. Then we got witness John Curry, I believe was his last name. He's a former bishop. He testified via Zoom, so there was not a good picture of him. He's a pilot in his day job stuff, but he is a former bishop of the Jacksonville Beach Ward. For those who don't know, Latter-day Saint clergy, it's all lay clergy. It's volunteer. You're called to the position for a certain number of years, but it's not, you don't get paid for it. You don't seek it out. And it's temporary and it's a heavy assignment. But again, you're not getting paid for it or anything. You have your own career and life and all. And bishop is the head of the congregation. He was bishop of the Jacksonville Beach Ward from April of 2018 to March of 2021. And bishops usually serve 3 to 5 years, so that's about right. And that is the ward apparently that Shanna attended after the divorce. Although he said she attended sporadically, it sounds like she only went if she had her daughter in. He says, yeah, she attended at times. That's relevant because this is the daughter who wanted to get baptized and who was already past the age of 8. Now, so here's just some little background on policies and procedures of LDS stuff. You can't get baptized until you are 8 years old, and that is considered the age of accountability, where you understand right from wrong. You can argue whether or not it's still too young to make that kind of commitment, but I will say it's a whole lot older than being christened. When you're 8 years old, if you're going to get baptized at that point, you have an interview with your bishop, and it's basically like, do you understand what baptism means? Do you know what a covenant is? Here's, what's going to happen. You are not getting baptized at the age of 8, and you wait. I'm not quite sure how long, but basically, if you have your next birthday at least, and beyond that, and still want to get baptized, then it's considered a convert baptism, and you have to talk to missionaries, get a little bit more instruction, and then there are requirements as well for any convert baptism at that point. And one of them is to have had a certain amount of church attendance to show your commitment. Shanna's daughter would have had to attend a certain amount of church. And Shanna, being the one who's trying to project that she's being the supportive, loving mother, even though she's left the church, she's supportive of her kids being part of it, because that's what Jared wants. Privately, she doesn't support, but publicly, she has to put it on that face. Baez is trying to make it look like she would attend church with her daughter, and see, she's supporting her daughter. I'm thinking she attended church with her daughter just so that she couldn't be blamed for her daughter not getting baptized. It sounds like Shanna was also really annoyed. If her daughter was going to be baptized, she wanted it to be done in her ward. Problem with that is that membership records, they stay with whatever a certain ward that you considered your home ward, and the daughter's records were in Jared's ward. Now, you could theoretically have had the records changed, but if Jared's the one that's the one actually raising the kids in the church, that would make more sense to be in his ward. And they probably already were and just stayed there when Shanna moved. Can you have a baptism elsewhere? Yes, but you would need authorization from the bishop of the home ward and a member of that bishopric, either the bishop or one of his 2 counselors, to attend the baptism wherever it is. And actually, they have to attend a baptism anyway, wherever it happens to be. But we do know that Shanna's daughter needed to have missionary discussions before she could get baptized, and that Shanna wanted the baptism to be in her ward, which, again, it could have happened if she maybe made those arrangements. But if she's just pissy about the fact that her daughter's records are somewhere else, there's just policy. Like, there are ways she could have done it. But I don't think that's evidence of her being supportive of her daughter. I think it's evidence of her trying to look supportive. She did express her dismay about Jared wanting the kids to be raised in the church. She expressed that dismay to her lunch bunch. Jose Baez is insisting that Shanna is supportive of her daughter being in the church. Why is she still not baptized? If she is truly supportive of her daughter wanting to be baptized, why 3 years later is she not? Jared's not around to make sure it happens? Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. The next witness on the stand was Marla. I want to say her last name was Rogers. It was hard to make out. She met Shanna when she was still living in Florida. They're both in the cookie world. They attended an event called CookieCon. As you can imagine, as bakers get there, and it's all about cookies and growing their businesses, and Shanna was working on a bakery business. They became fast friends, planning on attending CookieCon the next year as well. So they met in 2021, I believe. Shanna canceled, saying my ex-husband died, so I better stay home with the kids. I better not go this year. In Washington, that's where she had a house that was being built next door to her. And she was like, oh, Shanna, you should buy it. Come be my next door neighbor. Wouldn't that be fun? So Shanna's parents did. They bought the house next door to Marla, and Shanna moved in when Henry Cox said, yeah, let's take a chance and have you go back to Washington State. So that's cute. I don't know. Her parents are a real puzzle to me. Shanna was really struggling for money after the divorce. They had lived on what she called an educational stipend that the Gardner parents had provided to Shanna and Jared, because Jared was working on another degree. When the divorce happened, then they took away that educational stipend. Only then she needed to get multiple jobs. So it sounds like her parents kind of cut her off, and they also kind of sort of cut her off with the trust money. They gave her the money, but she didn't have control over it. And yet they bought what they call a beach house near Jacksonville and a minivan so they could visit her more easily in Florida. They buy her a house in Washington State. Oh, and then there's Jose Baez. They're hiring him. They're spending so much money on her in certain areas, and then they would withhold money in other areas. It's a puzzle to me. Baez is also making it out to be like, oh, poor Shanna's son. He actually says this in his press conference a few weeks after the hearing, but he says that he has a heart condition and he has to live close to sea level, no higher than 1,000 feet above sea level. And he describes his condition as something that's terminal, and how hard it is for her son to be away from his mother when he has a terminal condition. I don't know what her son's condition is, but from everything I've seen and heard, it sounds like it's a chronic condition that could potentially someday require a heart transplant. It could potentially be terminal, but we're talking years and years and years and years. Like, is it terminal if you're going to die at 47? To me, if you're saying a child has a terminal condition and therefore it is extra hard to be away from your parent, to me that sounds like he's almost on hospice. Like, it's imminent. He has some really fast, aggressive brain cancer or something. That's not what we're talking about here. It sounds like it's a chronic condition, probably a scary condition. It doesn't seem genuine to call it a terminal condition if it's not something this child could literally die from while Shanna is awaiting trial. So it seems like a disingenuous attempt to tug at heartstrings, and I don't appreciate that, Mr. Baez. When Marla was testifying, a couple of odd things. According to her, she never asked how Jared died or what happened around it. This is like an odd thing for a close friend to not ask. I saw even in the Daybell case, just a kind of an acquaintance coworker of Garth was like, what happened? I heard your mom passed away. Oh my gosh, what happened? That's a normal thing. People are curious, and often people are ask that when it's none of their business, right? So why would a really close, almost best friend not ask that question? That seems very odd. Seems to me they probably had these conversations and she just is conveniently forgetting them. She did conveniently forget what things that Shanna had told her about Jared. She said, oh yeah, she would vent about Jared and say bad things. And then it would be like, well, what did she say? I don't remember. I don't remember any specifics. My question is she a ditz with a really bad memory, or is she evading on purpose? And legally, the only real good way to evade that's not blatant lying is I don't recall clearly or something like that. Then we had Shanna's oldest sister, her half-sister, Megan White, testify. She lives in Alpine, Utah, from Sterling's first marriage. So shady to me that that family is so big on image when their relationship began an affair. According to Megan, Shelley and Sterling are now the guardians of the twins. From everything that I've heard, it's so sad to me that they have no contact with their two younger siblings that he had with Kirsten. Kirsten was close to them too, so this is their former stepmother. That's got to be another trauma. And then they're probably hearing smack about their dad and Kirsten, and they don't get to see their own siblings. I mean, the whole thing is just so sad. Her sister says that when she visited Shanna a lot after the death and before she moved, and as they drove past the Florida state line as they were leaving, Shanna cried. She was just shattered because she had roots in Florida and didn't want to move. That's when Shanna cried. I am the kind of person that I always wondered, like, if I were arrested for something, people would look at my reactions and, think I'm cold maybe, because when it comes to things involving, like, my kids, I go into solve it mode. I don't cry, even in front of my own kids, if it's something that they're dealing with, because I have to be strong. I have to be strong, and then it's not until later that I fall apart. Even if they're crying in front of me, I'm very stoic. It's hard for me to say, oh, well, she's not even crying in the situation, but there's no one that we've seen so far that testified that she's ever been emotional about any of this, except for when she crossed the border. It's the only time that we've heard about tears, and that seems odd to me. And certainly she doesn't seem sad that Jared is gone. If she's innocent, you would think that, oh, my poor kids, they've lost their dad. Even if I never liked him, even if she had all resentments or whatever else, you would think that she would feel bad for her kid's sake, whether or not she was guilty of these crimes. Something that was kind of creepy that Megan mentioned was that Shanna and their son, says that Shanna and he have a twin-like connection. And the example she gives is that if Shanna had a bad day, then he will say he felt bad too. That's messed up. That's an enmeshment situation with a parent and a child. Is the kid aware of this? Because if so, he's going to feel responsible for his mother. I feel gross today. Oh my gosh, mom must feel bad. I must make sure that she's happy. I must change things around. I must reach out to her. That is messed up. That's parentifying your son. I really hope he doesn't know that that's what Shanna thinks. But I have a feeling he probably does. And Megan also confirmed that Shanna was annoyed that the daughter could not be baptized or wasn't going to be baptized in her ward. And Megan herself is active, a member of the church. She admitted that her parents paid for the Airbnbs and hotel rooms that Shanna was using, moving around, in my opinion, evading police. Again, her lawyers say that she wasn't, but they don't give a decent explanation as to why she is moving around so much either. Shanna and Mario separated the summer of 2022, so after the murder, shocker, for any arrests or anything like that, and Mario apparently has had no, according to Megan, has had no contact with Shanna or the children since. So that's another loss. These poor kids. Here's a really wild thing. The Gardner family apparently has annual family meetings, and they actually have minutes that, I don't know who takes the minutes, records them down, but discussing family issues. And according to Megan, Jared's death has never come up in a family meeting. It was never discussed. Neither was Tenon, neither was Mario in this situation. Grief about Jared's death, helping the kids. Nothing related to Jared's death has been brought up in a Gardner annual family meeting, according to Megan. A big thing to have happened and not be talking about. Like, what the actual? And to add a little weirdness to it, Megan also admitted that yes, but Stampin' Up, the company that the parents own, founded and ran, and MLM, not a fan of those. So Stampin' Up released a letter talking about the murder. So Stampin' Up put out a statement, but the family didn't talk about it. That's tacky. It does not compute. Megan talks about a memorial that Shanna pulled together that they held at the family beach house that the parents had recently bought in the Florida area. So Shanna created this whole memorial and made sure it was documented by a photographer, a professional photographer. It doesn't necessarily have to be creepy and weird, but it does seem odd to me, controlling the narrative of what things look like. That memorial with this beautiful photo book feels to me that it's a way of saying, kids, look, aren't I a great mom? Take a look at some of the closing arguments from the defense. This is not Jose Baez, but part of Shanna's defense team.
It goes against the state that they didn't bring Miss Jensen in here. If they are saying she's essentially the link to all of this, and you have hearsay. And at best,
Well, hearsay is admissible,
I don't
but it can't all be based on hearsay.
I don't disagree with you, Judge, but the problem that this court should have with that is that the connections here, and they're trying to connect several dots, that the weight the court should give to the testimony of Detective Johns should not be given significant weight, especially with respect to Ms. Jensen. Because here's the problem with Ms. Jensen, is she wasn't brought in here, and then what are probably the most incriminating testimony for Ms. Jensen is not in the grand jury, it's when they pull her over and basically arrest her and transport her to the state attorney's office, and then try and freeze her out by leaving her isolated in a room, making her think she herself is a murderer. And then she apparently makes these statements that incriminate my client, Ms. Gardner, but despite technology in 2023, no one decides to take a recorded statement for her. They don't say right after that, Your Honor, we're going to take a sworn.
That is the one thing that I can agree with. They should have recorded that one interview with Kim Jensen. Everything else, they basically like arrested her and made her think she was a murderer. If you're not a murderer, you're not going to think you're a murderer. That doesn't make the least bit of sense, dude.
They don't write a report on it. And the first time that anyone on this side of the room hears about these statements is during this hearing.
And that's actually a lie. The prosecution later said they had the receipts. We provided this to you on this day. We provided this to you on this day. We told you about this on this day. These are lies.
Because he told you there's no report. It's not even in my case file. He said that.
I didn't pick that up.
He said there's no report. It's not in the file.
Okay.
That was one of my favorite moments of the entire hearing, when the judge was like trying to get a clarification, and then finally she just goes, "Okay, let's run that one little part again because it's beautiful."
Okay.
Whatever. Okay, just stop, please. Just can we be done? 9 days after the Arthur hearing, here is the judge's ruling.
Said I would do it by order, which I have copies for the parties. I've carefully considered the evidence that was presented during the last hearing, and I've granted the state's motion for pretrial detention and denied the defendant's motion to set bond. I'm filing that now.
Thank you, Judge. Also, on the same day as the denial of bond, there was discussion over evidence that should or should not have been given to the prosecution, supposed prosecution, their misconduct, discussing getting a taint team to go over information from an outside company with their own lawyer to contact the judge if they find anything. Prosecution has said they've deleted all of their files and they're waiting for the taint team to give them new versions, and they're going directly to the sources of different police departments, yada yada, to try to get information. It's all fresh. And yet Jose Baez is still insisting that there's prosecutorial misconduct, and dude, just stop. So tired of you. So tired of you. We'll leave it there today. Make sure you check out the press conference video. Dude, that guy just pisses me off. And then we'll dive into some of the more recent stuff with the most recent hearing, which is the Richardson hearing, and that is the one I've referred to a couple of times here. This is a hearing as a result of Jose Baez's motions and declaring that there were discovery and evidence violations that were Brady violations, and supposedly that the prosecution withheld exculpatory evidence. They absolutely did not, of police misconduct, ridiculous crap. So they had to have an entire hearing on that. And there was one piece of evidence that I thought, oh, he might have a point on that one, but it wouldn't be a registered violation. It would just might be something that he noticed that he could have just saved for trial to maybe put plant doubt into the jury's mind. But we're not at trial. We're not at trial yet, so I don't know why he even brought that up, and we'll get to that in that video. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Make sure you give the video a like. It really helps. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the notification bell. And yeah, I've been talking enough. My throat's a little dry. I may have to get myself some hot chocolate. Go get yourself something sweet.